Hey church, Pastor Shane here with another community group discussion starter video. We're continuing in our series out of the book of Colossians called First in Everything, because we believe if you put Jesus Christ first, then everything else will fall into its rightful place, that he is to be first and alone in that first place position in our lives. In the actual book of Colossians, Paul has been telling them a lot about what it means to be to put Christ first, emphasizing that Christ is worthy of being first. Then he talks to them about the fact that they need to make sure they're careful about other ideas or kind of ways of living that are like a Jesus plus something plan. So you take Jesus, you add something to this, and this is how you live the life. And he says, no. Those things that you would add onto Christ are not effective for living this transformed life that you've now been called to in Jesus Christ. And so now in chapter 3 that we've begun that, he talks about, okay, what does it actually look like to do this? And in chapter 3, he talks about putting off the old self or taking off the old self as if it was a piece of clothing. And to put on the new self, which is this new life in Christ. And next week we'll talk about what the new self looks like, but this week we're really looking at the old self and the fact that there are just certain attributes in our life that need to be put away, or as he says it in here, put to death, which is pretty serious. And he names a bunch of things: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desires, and covetousness, which is idolatry, which are really sins that kind of are about our selfishness. They are about our relationship with God, or really just our own purity in following Jesus. And then there's a second list. He says, you must put away them all: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing you have put off the old self and its practices. And then he says, you are bound together, you're one people now. And that's because these are all kind of relational things, that anger, malice, the things that would offend one another and put one another off. That's the kind of thing he's saying, put that aside, it is no good anymore. And so this week in your group, you should be talking about these things. I know it's uncomfortable to talk about sin, like none of us love doing that, but it's a reality that we're still tempted as Christians. And sometimes we do fall into sin, and we need to be reminded that we have been given this new life in Christ. And then we need to take off sin as if it was a piece of clothing and put it away, not to return to it again. And we saw in the text that we do that by and by turning to Jesus and by seeking the things that are above. When we align ourselves with God, it will help us actually live it out in our lives. That we need to kind of replace the old thinking, and we do that by seeking what is above, seeking godly things, understanding who God is so we understand our place in the world today. And I hope you'll look through this list and share kind of honestly. Do you ever experience covetousness or evil desires? He calls covetousness here idolatry, right? That if we desire something so much that we desire it more than God, it becomes an idol in our lives. It's serious. Lying, anger, wrath, slander, obscene talk. What is the thing that tempts you? What is the thing that gets in your way? And then of course, how can we help one another seek the things that are above, to set our minds, as it says in chapter 3, on the things that are above? And I think by both talking about the more difficult things, but also talking about the encouraging things, we will help one another get on that path towards what God has called us to. Because none of us want to live lives where we're hurting one another. We see how all these different things that are listed here really result in a damaged relationship with God or a damaged relationship with one another. And so now it's time to turn that desire that God has given us to change into a reality as we seek the things that are above, setting our minds on those things, rather than setting our minds back on these earthly things that only led us to sin in the first place. Hope you have a great week.